Welcome to this deep dive, where we take your curiosity and focus it into a powerful, clear understanding of complex subjects.
Glad to be here.
Today's mission is pretty focused. We're diving deep into military history, specifically German warfare between 1914 and 1945.
Right. Looking at that whole strategic and operational evolution.
And we're framing it around this timeless struggle, really, the idea of a quick, decisive war versus the grinding reality of attrition.
Exactly. And we're drawing on some really significant work to piece this together for you. We're looking at Michael Geyer's German strategy in the age of machine warfare, which is crucial. Williamson Murray's analysis, the strategy of decisive war versus the strategy of attrition. Timothy Lupfer on the elastic defense in depth, super important for tactics.
Definitely.
Jer Bailey's piece, The First World War and the Birth of Modern Warfare, and also some key insights on innovation from McGregor Knox and Williamson Murray's conclusion, The Future Behind Us.
So quite a range of sources. Our focus really is to understand those deep changes, social, political, technological, that just shattered the old way of war.
Yeah, the old professional rules.
And forced militaries, especially the German one, to innovate, often at just a staggering human cost. We really want to get into why. Why did nations, Germany in particular, keep chasing that quick knockout blow when the machine age seemed to scream long, bloody attrition?
It's a paradox, isn't it? Let's try and unpack that.
Well, cool.
Well, the fascinating thing, and maybe the most depressing, is how predictable the miscalculation is.
You mean starting wars thinking they'll be short?
Almost always. Leaders seem invariably convinced they're starting something quick and decisive.
Which brings us straight to Clausewitz, right? The irony there.
The Clausewitz irony, exactly. He warned that, no sane leader should start a war without being crystal clear on the goal and the how.
Makes sense.
But, as all these sources show, those initial calculations, almost always wrong. Just fundamentally flawed from the get-go.
Why, though? Is it just overconfidence?
Partly. But Clausewitz points to these uncontrollable elements.
Yeah.
The enemy, first off, they never do what you expect.
Right, they get a vote.
Always. Then there's chance, pure luck, good or bad. Taike, the Greeks called it.
Okay.
And maybe most importantly, friction. That gap between plan and reality. Logistics fail, orders get misunderstood, weather messes things up.
All the stuff that gums up the works.
Precisely. And the quest for decisive war tries to somehow bypass all that, but the industrial age, well, it just amplified friction massively.
And this isn't just a modern problem, is it? This tension goes way back.
Oh, absolutely. Look at Sparta back in 431, before Common Era. That debate they had before the Peloponnesian War.
Right, the invasion of Attica. They thought they could just march in, force a battle, win decisively, and go home.
That was the dominant view. Short, sharp, decisive, get it over with.
But King Archidamnus warned them, didn't he?
He did. He stood up and basically said, hold on, this isn't going to be quick. Athens has walls, a navy, money. We're looking at a long, grinding war. He basically outlined an attrition strategy.
And how did that go down?
Not well. He was urging caution, adaptation, needing money and ships. Things Sparta wasn't really geared for initially. He literally said, I fear we shall be leaving it to our children after us.
Chillingly accurate.
Yep.
But they went for the decisive option anyway.
They did. And the war lasted 27 years. Devastating Greece. It just shows this deep human bias against accepting attrition, even when it's staring you in the face.
And that bias becomes catastrophically dangerous with mass mobilization.
Exactly. That's the watershed moment. The French Revolution, mobilizing the nation, combined with the Industrial Revolution, providing the means.
Suddenly, states can throw unbelievable amounts of people and resources into a conflict.
Making that quick, decisive victory against someone equally mobilized almost a fantasy, a chimera, as Murray puts it.
Napoleon seems like the ultimate example here. Operational genius, wins amazing battles.
Austerlitz, Jena Auerstadt, he could annihilate armies. Absolutely brilliant operationally.
But by 1813, it wasn't enough. Winning battles didn't win the war anymore.
No, because the Allies just kept coming back. They had superior staying power. Why? Two big reasons.
Manpower, obviously, the sheer numbers eventually.
Yes, but critically, resources,
Okay.
especially British money and British industry.
Ah, the Industrial Revolution kicking in.
Massively. The sources point out, by 1800, Britain's coal output was 20 times that of France. They could bankroll coalitions, send weapons like 100,000 muskets to Prussia and Russia in 1813 alone.
Wow.
So Napoleon's genius couldn't overcome the sheer weight of industrialized resources and the political will to keep fighting.
So the takeaway, really, especially looking ahead to the World Wars, is that since the Napoleonic era, massive resources are a huge factor. Maybe not guaranteeing victory, but
definitely tipping the scales, often through attrition. It becomes about endurance.
which leads us right into the American Civil War. That seems like the moment this reality really hits home.
It does. Think about Ulysses S. Grant. Early in the war, after taking Forts Henry and Donelson, he, like many, thought maybe a few more big wins could just end it.
The decisive blow idea again.
Yeah. But then came Shiloh, April 1862.
A horrific battle, just industrialized slaughter on a new scale.
Exactly. 2 days, massive casualties, and the Confederates counterattacked with incredible ferocity. Grant wrote later that after Shiloh, he gave up all idea of saving the Union except by complete conquest.
Complete conquest, that's a shift.
It's huge. It's the acceptance of attrition. He realized this wasn't about brilliant maneuvers anymore. It was about grinding down the enemy's ability and will to fight. Total war, essentially.
And contrast that with Robert E. Lee still searching for that one Napoleonic knockout punch.
Right. Lee's brilliance was undeniable, but his focus on the decisive battle, like Gettysburg, well, it bled the Army of Northern Virginia white. They couldn't replace those losses.
He needed operational wins to have political effects, but lacked the deep resources.
Exactly. Whereas Grant and Sherman, too, they become these incredible problem solvers, projecting power, logistics, rebuilding railways, supply dumps.
Using the North's industrial strength as a weapon.
Absolutely. Grant's strategy became two-pronged. Relentless attrition against Lee's army, and Sherman destroying the South's capacity to wage war factories, farms, infrastructure.
So he embraced the nature of this new kind of warfare.
He did. He forced the Confederacy into a long war of attrition it simply couldn't sustain. And that lesson that industrial war favors attrition was one the German High Command in 1914 seemed determined to ignore.
Okay, so Germany, 1914. They march off clinging to this illusion of a short, professional, decisive war. It's like they didn't read the memo from the 19th century.
It's quite stunning, isn't it? The old German professional strategy, the one embodied by Schlieffen, was really about protecting the army's independence.
How so?
It was a deal, basically. The military promised politicians a quick, limited war, the Gesamtschlacht, this continuous enveloping operation to annihilate the enemy fast.
And in return?
In return, politics stays out. Society doesn't get deeply involved. The army handles it professionally and swiftly. Keep the messy masses out of strategy.
An all-or-nothing bet on speed and professional skill.
Totally. But it failed almost immediately. That huge flanking maneuver in the West stalled. The retreat from the Marne in September 1914 that just shattered everything.
The quick war was dead. Stalemate.
And the professional army lost control. Strategy just kind of disintegrated into what Geyer calls micropolitics and microstrategies. Chaos.
Which leads to the next phase, right? Falkenhayn and the Second Supreme Command trying to regain control.
Yeah, by late 1915, Erich von Falkenhayn had to face facts. A big breakthrough on the Western Front just wasn't happening.
So he shifts, but not quite to Grant's style of attrition.
No, it was an attempt to control attrition. His idea for Verdun was grimly logical in a way. Bleed the French army white at a point they couldn't afford to lose.
Force them to the negotiating table before German society got fully mobilized and demanded a say in the war.
Exactly. It was still an elite professional response, trying to keep mass politics out of it, break the enemy's will through calculated losses, not necessarily conquer territory.
But Verdun, it became the opposite of control, didn't it? A horrific meat grinder.
A total disaster. Because, as the sources point out, German tactics were still geared for the all-out offensive. They hadn't developed the methods for careful attritional fighting.
They couldn't actually execute calculated attrition.
No. Falkenhayn sent men against fortresses, 19th century style. There was no defensive depth, no flexibility to manage casualty ratios. It just became this uncontrolled slugfest, massive losses on both sides.
Bailey calls it the military impasse of World War I. It just showed the old ways were utterly bankrupt.
Completely. And that failure, plus the catastrophe for the German defenders at the Somme in 1916, where their rigid lines were just pulverized.
Yeah.
That forced a really radical change.
Enter Ludendorff and Hindenburg, the Third Supreme Command.
Right. And Ludendorff is a key figure here. He was almost a zealot for efficiency, ruthless, brilliant in some ways, delegated power downwards.
And he fully embraced merging the military and society, but in a terrifying way.
Yeah, he pushed for this technical dictatorship,
Yeah.
total state control for total war, everyone working for war. It became this all-consuming national effort managed by the military elite.
And this is where, according to Geyer, the whole relationship between war and politics gets flipped on its head.
Radically inverted. Ludendorff essentially threw Clausewitz overboard. He actually said, all theories of Clausewitz have to be thrown overboard. War is the highest expression of the racial will of life.
Whoa, so war isn't a tool of policy anymore.
For Ludendorff, war became the policy. Instead of strategy defining limited goals and asking what means do we need, his approach became what means can we possibly mobilize?
And the sheer ability to mobilize dictated the goals.
Precisely. This escalatory strategy, as Geyer calls it. The means started determining the ends. If we can triple munitions production with the Hindenburg program, then our goal must be total victory, unlimited aims.
Because more is better.
Exactly. It's opportunistic, maximize force, maximize effort, and assume that will somehow lead to victory. Strategy becomes just a justification for escalating violence.
So the Hindenburg program wasn't tied to realistic political objectives.
Not really. It was about maximizing the war machine's output almost for its own sake.
That sounds incredibly dangerous, setting a precedent.
It was. This purely technocratic managerial approach to violence, detached from political reality, paved the way for the even greater catastrophe to come. But here's the paradox. Even within that strategically reckless framework, the German army achieved some truly remarkable tactical innovations, a genuine revolution in military affairs on the ground.
Stemming from the failures at Verdun and the Somme, Ludendorff saw the old rigid defense wasn't working.
He visited the Somme front, saw the devastation, and was convinced they had to change fundamentally how they defended, which led to this new doctrine, formalized in late 1916.
The principles of command and the defensive battle in position warfare. And the core idea was...
Stop trying to hold the front trench at all costs. That was suicide against modern artillery.
So what was the new objective?
Flip it. Preserve your strength, make the attacker bleed, waste his resources, frustrate him, let him punch into empty space, essentially. Territory was secondary.
How did they achieve that? It sounds counterintuitive.
Through depth and firepower. Not massed infantry in the front line. The defense was organized in zones.
Oh, right. The sources detail these zones. Can you walk us through them?
Okay, first you had the outpost zone. Lightly held, just machine gun nests, maybe some wire. Its job was to slow the enemy, disrupt their formations, and crucially, signal where the main attack was hitting.
So like a tripwire.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then behind that, the main battle zone. This was deep, maybe 1,500 to 3,000 meters. This is where the real fighting was meant to happen. But the key innovation was where they put the main line of resistance.
Not on the forward slope facing the enemy.
No, on the reverse slope, hidden from direct observation from the enemy's ground troops and, crucially, from their artillery observers.
Ah, so the massive Allied artillery bombardments would mostly fall on.
On the lightly held outpost zone, or the empty forward slope, the main German strength was shielded.
Clever. And when the Allied infantry came over the crest,
They'd often outrun their own artillery support, which was still mostly static, and suddenly face intact German machine guns and pre-planned artillery fire from deep positions.
and the third zone.
The rearward zone. This held the main reserves and the bulk of the artillery, positioned far back for protection and better observation.
This whole system gives it that elasticity Lipfer talks about. It bends, absorbs the punch.
And then snaps back with immediate counterattacks to Gegenstoß. That was crucial.
How were they organized to do that so quickly? Speed seems key.
It was the key. They knew the attacker was most vulnerable right after breaking in before they could consolidate. So units were layered in depth, squads, companies, battalions, right back to dedicated counterattack divisions of the rearward zone, maybe 9 kilometers back, ready to hit back fast.
And the command structure had to change to enable that speed, right?
Right.
Less rigid hierarchy?
Hugely different, much more decentralized. The infantry division became the main fighting unit. Battalion commanders right there in the chaos got enormous latitude.
They could control reinforcements, bypass headquarters.
Yes, even bypass their own regimental HQ during the heat of battle and report directly to the division commander. It was all about speed, initiative, independent action, empowering junior leaders. This is where you really see the Stoßtruppen and the stormtroopers, methods filtering into the whole army.
Wow, that's a big shift. And the contrast with the Allies is stark. The Nivelle Offensive in April 1917.
A perfect, tragic example of inflexibility. General Nivelle thought he had the formula based on limited successes at Verdun.
His rolling barrage tactic.
Right. Heavy artillery barrage, infantry follows right behind. He treated it like gospel, an article of faith. He just wouldn't accept that the Germans might have adapted.
And the French commanders were trained to just follow the plan rigidly.
Often competing to see who could execute the rolling barrage fastest. But the infantry just couldn't keep up with that insane pace, as one source calls it.
So they fell behind the protective artillery fire.
Exactly. And walked right into the German battle zone with its machine guns waiting on the reverse slopes, ready to inflict devastating casualties.
And Nivelle just pressed on, even when it was clearly failing.
He refused to change course, even when the plan had clearly been compromised beforehand. It highlights what Lieutenant Colonel Pascal Lucas of the French Army later noted, that Allied reliance on sheer firepower often stifled junior leadership and initiative, leading to exactly the kind of centralized, inflexible command the German elastic defense was designed to exploit.
Okay, so this elastic defense is incredibly reliant on effective artillery, positioned in depth, which ties into another massive shift, the rise of systematic indirect fire.
Absolutely. J.R. Bailey's work highlights this. The idea of lobbing shells at unseen targets is ancient think trebuchets.
Right.
But applying it systematically, mathematically, that was relatively new. A Russian colonel, Karl Guk, figured out the basics back in 1882. But in 1914...
Armies weren't really thinking that way, because of the short war illusion.
Exactly. They favored direct fire guns, good for quick tactical support. Right. There wasn't seen to be an operational need for complex indirect fire outside of sieges. Their guns were often too short-ranged anyway.
So artillery starts the war as almost a tactical bodyguard, not a long-range killer.
Pretty much. But the stalemate changed everything. Brutal necessity forced innovation. By 1916, you see the development of predicted fire shooting without prior registration shots.
Which gives away your position.
Right. Plus, sound ranging to locate enemy guns by the noise they made, and flash spotting to locate them visually at night. These techniques, still used today, allowed artillery to truly dominate.
And ironically, that dominance actually brought maneuver back.
In a way, yes. Because now you had a tool that could potentially suppress or destroy the enemy's deep defenses before your infantry attacked.
But the operational problem, Bailey points out, was still there. The break-in versus the breakout.
Yes. You might punch a hole with your initial artillery plan, but the German defenses were so deep, those reserves 9 kilometers back, ready to counterattack in 2 hours.
Your attacking infantry quickly outran their artillery support.
Exactly. The guns were still mostly static, hard to move forward quickly across shattered ground, so the attack would stall as it hit the deeper defenses without adequate fire support.
The British tried tanks at Cambrai in 1917 to solve the break-in without a long bombardment.
Right. Tanks cut the wire, allowed for surprise predicted fire. It worked, tactically, a breakthrough, but they couldn't sustain it, couldn't get the artillery and supplies forward fast enough to exploit it. The breakout failed.
Which brings us to the German spring offensives in 1918, the Kaiserschlacht. This was meant to be the solution, the tactical peak of indirect fire.
It really was. Colonel Georg Bruthmüller, the German artillery genius. His methods were revolutionary. Short, incredibly intense, surprise bombardments using predicted fire. No warning.
But it wasn't just the timing, it was the organization of the artillery.
That was key. They task-organized the guns. Instead of just grouping them by unit or size, they created functional groups, a total departure from tradition.
7 functional groups, the sources say. What did they do?
It was about hitting the enemy systemically. One group focused only on counter-battery fire, silencing the enemy guns. Another targeted known headquarters and communication lines.
Wow.
Another used gas shells on specific enemy assembly areas. Another laid harassing fire deep in the enemy rear to stop reserves moving up, and so on. Close battle, deep battle, all coordinated.
So surgically dismantling the enemy's command, control, and support before the infantry assault even began.
Exactly. Neutralize the brain and the muscles before the main punch. And it worked tactically. They achieved stunning breakthroughs, punched huge holes in the Allied lines for the first time in years.
But it still failed. Strategically, operationally, why?
It comes back to Ludendorff and the lack of clear goals. Remember him saying, "We hack a hole, the rest comes on its own."
No real operational objective beyond the breakthrough itself.
None. No defined strategic purpose, which led to absolute chaos, especially logistically.
Friction strikes back. You make this huge advance, but you can't sustain it.
They were trying to push supplies forward over ground, pulverized by years of shelling, using mostly horse-drawn wagons. The artillery, the ammunition, they couldn't keep up with the infantry advance.
And captured railways were damaged or the wrong gauge?
Right. Plus, there were discipline problems. Advancing troops would find huge Allied supply dumps full of food and luxuries they hadn't seen in years.
And they just stopped.
They'd stop to loot and feast. The advance would halt, discipline would break down, and it gave the Allies crucial time to rush reserves in and stabilize the front.
So these brilliant tactical successes just fizzled out.
Every single time. After 5 or 6 days, the offensive would grind to a halt. They suffered almost 1 million casualties in 4 months. Ludendorff's obsession with the maximum tactical effort bled the army white and led directly to its collapse later in 1918. Tactical genius squandered by strategic vacuum.
This whole cycle, tactical brilliance undone by strategic failure, it sets the stage for the interwar period and eventually World War II. But first, Knox and Murray make a really useful distinction we should touch on: military revolutions versus revolutions in military affairs.
Right. It helps explain how and why some militaries adapt better than others. A military revolution, an MR, is huge, uncontrollable. Think the French Revolution plus industrialization. It changes the fundamental nature of war, driven by massive societal shifts.
Rare, cataclysmic.
Exactly. Whereas a revolution in military affairs, an RMA, is more focused. It's a period where military innovates deliberately, doctrine, tactics, tech, usually at the operational level.
And crucially, it's often driven by trying to solve a specific problem against a specific potential enemy.
That's the key to successful RMAs. They need first a coherent doctrine built within a realistic, critical culture, an organization willing to challenge its own assumptions.
Not just confirming what they hope is true.
No, genuine, open-ended experiments. Test things honestly. And second, they need to focus on fighting actual potential opponents, not just hypothetical ones.
Who did this well in the interwar years?
The Germans, again, with their development of combined arms ground warfare. The U.S. Navy, preparing for war in the Pacific. And the U.S. Marine Corps.
The Marines are a fascinating case. After Gallipoli in World War I, amphibious assault looked like suicide?
Most thought so. But the Marines looked at the Pacific, looked at Japan, and said, we have to solve this problem. They spent decades figuring out the incredibly complex logistics, technology, and doctrine for amphibious landings against defended islands.
And their culture allowed for that. Debate, tough exercises?
Yes, a culture of critical thinking and realistic testing. They weren't just validating hopes. They were solving a hard, real-world problem against a specific future enemy.
And the German army, the Reichsheer? Similar focus?
Very similar. They weren't developing blitzkrieg in a vacuum. They were solving the problem they themselves created in 1918, how to break through a deep, elastic defense.
So, tanks, motorized infantry, dive bombers, all focused on cracking the French or Polish or Czech defenses they expected to face.
Exactly. Realistic problem solving against likely opponents.
Okay, now contrast that with the air power theorists. The British Royal Air Force, the U.S. Army Air Corps.
Big contrast. Their innovation, focused on strategic bombing, was often directed against a kind of generic, easily cowed, hypothetical enemy.
They developed this mystical faith, as the sources put it, that bombers could survive unescorted and win wars alone.
Yes, particularly the RAF. They seem to ignore the key lessons of World War I, the absolute need for air superiority before anything else, and the immense difficulty of actually finding and hitting targets accurately from the air.
They just believed the bomber would always get through.
Despite exercises showing bombers were incredibly vulnerable, it was a triumph of doctrine over evidence, a failure of critical culture.
Until reality hit hard early in World War II.
Yes, the Butt Report finally forced the RAF to confront the fact that their bombing was incredibly inaccurate, that they basically wasted huge efforts for negligible results. Adherence to a flawed doctrine cost them dearly.
Which brings us back to Germany and their second huge strategic failure in World War II. They mastered the combined arms RMA.
Operationally brilliant, yes. But that brilliance still couldn't make up for a total absence of sound strategy.
The Third Reich went to war based on
Hitler's ideology. Conquest of Lebensraum, living space, in the East. There was no coherent grand strategy, no joint military strategy, just opportunistic aggression driven by racist ideology.
And the military leadership? They just went along with it.
They lacked the integrity or the power to effectively challenge Hitler. So they channeled their considerable talents into purely operational planning, enabling this horrific symbiosis, as Geyer calls it, between military technocracy and Nazi ideology.
Maximum efficiency in service of irrational, unlimited goals.
Exactly. And Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union in 1941, is the ultimate example.
A massive operational plan built on what? Wishful thinking.
Built on the ideological delusion that the Soviet Union was a rotten structure that would collapse after a few hard kicks. They estimated victory in 17 weeks.
17 weeks.
And the operational planning itself was plagued by unlimited greed, as one source describes it. Constant arguments between commanders about the main objective, Moscow or Ukraine, reflecting competing ambitions, not strategic clarity.
They never even agreed on the decisive point.
No. And initially, the operational successes were staggering. Huge encirclements, hundreds of thousands of prisoners.
Looked like 1940 all over again.
For a moment. But none of it was decisive. Because they ran headlong into the war of attrition they were institutionally designed to avoid.
Hitler himself realized it, didn't he? That you couldn't beat the Russians with just operational wins.
He did. He admitted he simply does not acknowledge defeat. And why would they? The sheer brutality of the German invasion, the explicit policies of racist terror and subjugation.
It unified Soviet resistance, turned it into a true patriotic war.
Absolutely. The very ideology driving the invasion guaranteed the Soviets would fight with incredible tenacity. The Germans found themselves in exactly the kind of grinding, escalating war of destruction they couldn't win.
Inflicting damage became the only goal because they couldn't achieve a political one.
Right. They maximized the means of violence, that technocratic efficiency, but it just led to self-destruction against enemies who could outproduce them and were willing to endure unimaginable suffering. Hashtag outro.
So looking back over this 30-year period, it's just a tragic cycle, isn't it? German military elites trying and failing to keep war limited and professional.
Developing incredible tactical and operational skill along the way, the elastic defense, combined arms, truly innovative stuff.
But ultimately, that brilliance became a substitute for sound strategic thinking.
And the German failure really highlights this fundamental danger in modern war. Once you cross that threshold, once you abandon limitation.
Military skill alone isn't enough.
Not against an enemy with the resources and the political will to fight a long war of attrition. The very tools Germany perfected to break the World War I stalemate became the means for apocalyptic, unlimited war in World War II. The grim irony.
So for you listening, what's the big takeaway here about conflict, even today? It seems the German military got incredibly good at the how of war, the competitive management of military action, as Geyer puts it.
Yeah, they mastered the mechanics.
But they lost sight of the why, the fundamental purpose of using force, achieving realistic, limited political goals. They just kept escalating.
And that question is timeless, maybe more relevant than ever. Today, technology promises cleaner, faster, frictionless war. Operational efficiency is prized above all.
So the provocative thought we want to leave you with is this. How do political and military leaders ensure that this relentless pursuit of operational and technological perfection doesn't displace realistic strategy again?
How do we avoid falling into that same trap, where the sheer capability to inflict violence becomes its own justification, opening the door to unintended, unlimited escalation? It's still the leader's burden to ask, is this war feasible? Do the means truly match achievable ends? Or are we just climbing that ladder of escalation again?